Hello and welcome back to the 50th episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. We've already done 50 episodes, 2 more, and we'll be equal to my age. So That's quite a milestone. That's what we've been aiming at all along, actually. Today's going to be a very special episode of WJ Live. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal. I am flanked by two of our, that's a word I don't get to use very often.
It's true.
Flanked by two of our deputy managing editors, Brian Chai and Joseph Sedian. Thank you guys for being on the show today. Today's a special episode because today is President Donald J. Trump's final full day in office. Tomorrow, former Vice President Joseph Biden will be inaugurated and become president, and Donald Trump will become the former president of the United States. So today, what we want to do is talk about some of Donald Trump's accomplishments. Unfortunately, the events of the past couple of weeks, past couple of months, really have overshadowed a lot of the good that Donald Trump has done and should be remembered for. He has a very positive legacy. In fact, so many things that we can't even enumerate them all on this show without staying here all day, which we're not going to do, and which you wouldn't do if we did do it. There are as we sat down to talk about what we wanted to cover, there were so many things that we just couldn't do justice to that didn't make the list. For instance, his legacy in the Middle East, I think, is something no one wants to talk about. Something that president after president for decades has worked to accomplish. With Israel and some of her surrounding nations. We're not going to go into that in any depth today, but that's one that should not be forgotten.
We've got some Middle East stuff later on down the road.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you have reference to it. Yes,
and
which is
real quick. Like, I know we don't want to dive too deep into it, but I will say it is telling how quiet. Like, the media all mocked Trump when he talked about bringing some semblance of peace to the Middle East. So it'll never happen. It's impossible. Right. And once he actually gets a few deals done, you don't hear a peep.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Silence. No. Right. And how many presidents had promised to move the embassy to Jerusalem as well? Presidents, it should be noted, on both sides of the aisle, and none of them did it until Donald Trump. So we just talked about some of the things we're not going to talk about today. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight that I think are particularly interesting accomplishments of Trump's. One, because it's been so effective, and another because I think it could be long-lasting. I want to get your input on that. The first is deregulation. Donald Trump, in running for office, promised that he would eliminate 2 regulations for every new one that he put in place. And he did that. Forbes came out with an analysis of that, of his efforts in that roughly a month ago as he was closing out December. And according to their count, in 2017, for every new regulation the federal government put in place, 22 were eliminated. Now, of course, it depends on how you count them, and different people will argue with that number a little bit. Trump detractors will say, no, it's not 22, it's only 13. Whatever. That's still an amazing number. In 2018, it was 12-1, according to Forbes analysis. In 2019, it was 4.3-1. In 2020, it was just shy of 2-1, at least at the time they were doing their analysis. So he didn't quite hit that goal in 2020, but over the course of his 4-year term, he obviously hit that goal and far better. Estimated cost savings just in 2020 from the deregulation efforts amounted to about $100 billion. So that was a pretty significant effort on his part, largely by executive order. And then the other issue that often comes up, maybe most often when we talk about Donald Trump's legacy, it's the federal bench, the appointments that he made to federal judgeships. Just to highlight a few, he appointed, or nominated, I guess I should say, 230 federal judges overall during his 4 years. 30% of all appeals court judges are now Donald Trump appointees. That's a huge percentage. Of course, we all know the 3 Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. And two quotes I'm going to read very quickly. One, this is from Jonathan Adler, a law professor at Case Western Reserve University School of Law in Cleveland. My condolences to Cleveland, by the way. Not just for losing this past weekend, but for being Cleveland. Trump has basically done more than any president has done in a single term since President Jimmy Carter to put his stamp on the judiciary. That's a pretty definitive statement, and pretty dramatic given that Congress under Carter added, I think, 150 new judgeships, new positions.
So he had to get something done.
Yeah, exactly. And how big is that? He expanded the federal bench, and then Trump filled it. So that's a pretty significant comparison between those two. And then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell recently said, it's by far the most long-lasting accomplishment of the current administration. And I think I agree with that. And I wanted to get you guys to weigh in on that. Some of these judges, of course, were quite young. Some were in their 30s even, and so could be around for 3 decades or longer. These appointments are, of course, for life. So unless they retire or do something that warrants removal by impeachment, which is it happens, but it's pretty darn rare, they're going to be around for a long time. But it's also harder to quantify the impact of the federal judgeships, whereas deregulations, you can count them, you can say, they saved, you can at least estimate, we saved $100 billion. That's not nothing. That's nothing compared to the whole federal debt, but it's not nothing. And so that one is easier to kind of get your arms around. Which of these two do you think is the more significant change, and what do you think is what do you measure that by? How do you decide what's more significant?
Well, I think the courts are the more significant change. I love the deregulation. I think it was a great accomplishment. Unfortunately, Joe Biden can re-implement a lot of that stuff by using executive orders. So don't be surprised if tomorrow or in the days and weeks to come, he implements a lot of those regulations again, because a lot of those were from the Obama administration. And Joe Biden has made it very clear that he wants sort of a return to the Obama administration.
2.0.
Right. So I don't think that's as lasting as I would like it to be. I think when it comes to regulation and stuff like that, it really just changes based off of the administration. Now, the courts, on the other hand, that's Trump's legacy, because it's going to live past him after he is no longer in office. It's going to live past him, like you said, for 30 or 40 years. And
probably past his lifetime.
Past his lifetime, yeah.
And
that's what a legacy is. It's something that lives beyond you. It's bigger than Trump. It's bigger than the Republican Party. It's about the Constitution and America, and
it's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see.
Thank you, Hamilton.
You're welcome.
So I think that's his biggest. Well, not biggest of those two things. I think that's the bigger accomplishment, just in terms of it lasting longer. We have all these young people who the left loves to decry the Federalist Society, and sort of there's all these conservative judges, right, who maybe come up the same way, and they're sort of groomed to be constitutionalists, and the left makes this out to be something that's really bad. Like, oh, those scary lawyers from the Federalist Society are coming again. That's not true. They're good because they like the Constitution, and Trump had great advisors who told him you should nominate these people because they are constitutionalists and originalists.
Elected
and it's huge. It's huge. The left uses it as a boogeyman, and it's a really good thing.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the federal bench is clearly going to be the longer lasting legacy. But I do think one interesting thing with the deregulation is that, as Joe alluded to, a lot of that's probably going to get torn up by Biden coming up. But in a sense, it does. I think Trump's done a good job. Not that he's like trying to set up Biden to fail or anything like that, because Biden's going to do this himself. But it does feel as though that's a really good marker, because Biden right now, I don't think has, like we've seen the stories, like people like on the squad and what have you are already upset with him because he's not doling out as much money as he possibly
he's
can.
not leftist enough.
Yeah, which is mind-boggling. But, this just gives Biden another pitfall to fall into. And I don't think Trump is intentionally trying to sabotage Biden in any way. And Biden could, easily avoid these pitfalls by not, adding all unnecessary excessive spending. But I do think it will be one way in which, Trump slashed $100 billion, which, like you said, not an insignificant amount of money, maybe compared to the national debt. Yeah, it is fairly insignificant. But, if Trump slashed $100 billion and Biden tacks on $500 billion, that's going to be sort of a lasting. That's something people will remember about the Biden era, and not for good reasons.
Yeah, no, that's true, Brian. I think the one thing we don't think about a lot, or haven't recently, because the stock market, for instance, has done so well. I mean, the economy under Trump did very, very well. It got hit by Corona, obviously, but all the lockdowns, and it wasn't actually Corona. It was
the lockdowns,
the useless lockdowns, the now proven useless lockdowns, in response to Corona. But other than that, Trump's economic domestic economic record, was pretty strong. Part of that was because it was so weak for the 8 years prior, because companies were so slow to invest. They were so scared to invest because they didn't know what crazy thing the Obama administration was going to do next. And so they didn't want to invest over here because over here could be regulated, out of existence a week from now. And so they didn't want to put it over here because the same thing could happen. And so companies were very slow to invest, slow to expand, slow to hire. I wonder if we're going to see the same kind of concern from businesses, large and small, under a Biden administration. And regulation would be one of the ways that would be expressed.
Yeah, I've long believed, just on a personal level, that Trump's policies were never for whatever faults you might have of Trump. I feel like it's almost impossible to skewer the policy itself. And in this case, like you said, we saw companies just petrified of doing anything during 8 years of Obama. And, however this breaks down, whether we get 2 years of Biden, 2 years of Harris, however it ends up breaking down.
10 minutes of Biden, 4 years, or however, whatever it ends up being.
You're essentially going to get a similar ripple effect, I imagine. I remember, I saw a story, or I was reading a story recently about, I want to say they kind of polled like Europeans. I didn't look too deeply into the actual polling methods.
I know what you're talking about.
They may like Biden more just on a personable level, but they have no faith in him to make the economics of the situation better. And I think that was pretty telling.
Yeah, even when the left wanted to attack Trump on a policy basis, which wasn't very often, right?
No.
I mean, mostly they attacked him on personality stuff.
Call it racist and
exactly. Even so, when they did try to get after him on a policy basis, it was mostly based on lies or half truths. It was Donald Trump puts people in cages.
Yeah,
which wants to take healthcare away from.
Yeah, exactly. Obama era policies or just flat out untruths.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. His policy record, even during the Trump administration, was hard to attack, which proven by the ways the left resorted to attacking him.
I'm glad that you brought up the left calling Trump racist, Joe, because what I wanted to bring to the table as far as what I thought was one of Trump's bigger accomplishments. I know, George, you started the show by saying last few months weren't the best. It kind of overshadowed a lot of what he did accomplish.
It's all people are taught, whether they were the best or not. It's all people are talking about. Yeah.
On Monday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the left had it freaked out again because Trump put out what the White House put out, the 1776 Commission, which is, I guess for lack of a better term, kind of counter curriculum. It's sort of a plea with Americans to, don't hate America, which is something
more the 1619.
Yes, it was the 17. That was a direct response to the 1619 project thing, which was the New York Times.
Sponsored by the New York Times, so you know it's going to be quality stuff. America-loving, patriotic, very centrist, just like everything the New York Times does, Joe.
Yep. But anyway, I have a couple lines here that I definitely wanted to kind of read out. One thing they talked about, the 1776 Commission talked about, Americans must stand up to the petty tyrants in every sphere who demand that we speak only of America's sins while denying her greatness. That line stood out to me because it does feel like one thing that, and to the degree of how much success Trump had in doing this is certainly up for debate, but I don't think anyone can say Trump didn't try to bring back American exceptionalism.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Which, it just feels...
And the left hated him for it. They would acknowledge he tried to do that.
Yeah.
They just think that's a bad goal.
Joe?
No, go ahead with the
Oh, okay.
1776.
And then he keeps going. One thing they talked about was America's ugly history with slavery. Many Americans labor under the illusion that slavery was somehow a uniquely American evil,
Yeah.
which is true. I mean, throughout history, slavery's exist, and it should be condemned, obviously. But of course, the left is taking that as, Trump is pro-slavery, which is mind-boggling.
Right. Yeah.
And then lastly, the last big thing he talks, or not the last thing, but the last thing I want to focus on is the commission's kind of counter to identity politics, which has been very prevalent. I think I want to say it actually started kind of towards the tail end of the George Bush administration, and then it kind of exploded during the Obama years. But just the idea of whittling everyone down to their identity, and that's their only qualification.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive. What's funny is I am first generation immigrant, and the American dream, as has always been, or at least how I've always interpreted it, is the ability to come in, work hard, and accomplish things. Nowhere in that American dream does it say, I'll just use this because I am, but you're Asian, you get an extra. You get an extra little bump here just because, that's just not how that's one of the most infuriating things of identity politics is, in some ways, I hate throwing the term around, but in some ways, I think identity politics are as racist as anything, in recent American history, where the idea that, someone is not white, so therefore, they deserve more. That's not it. That's not what America was built on or stands for. It's just mind-boggling that that's a thing. But yeah, that came out Monday, and I was really impressed with it. And it's always a good sign when places like CNN are just freaking out over this. That's usually a pretty good sign that, hey, maybe this is a good thing. And yeah, just reading that, reading about just what the doctrine, the commission said, I was impressed. Anyone who's watched this show knows that I am not by any stretch like a hardcore Trump supporter. I've supported a lot of what he did, but this was, I thought, very well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I agree with everything you said. I guess my one question would be, what happens now to the 1776? I guess commission you said, or project?
Yeah,
Commission. Yeah. So, how will it affect going forward? Right, for the next 4 years, will that last? Do you think?
No, because I can't remember what exactly Biden was using this in reference to, but Biden's already come out and said his small business plans. He wants
Build back better.
His economic plans are going to be largely based
on
in race.
Yeah, race
social
and
justice,
gender and that stuff,
as opposed to economics.
Yeah, but yeah, I do. That is certainly a concern, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because what I wanted to posit to you guys was, assuming Biden does kind of set all this back, because at the point we're at currently in American history, do you think we can move forward from that, or is this kind of just plunging into endless identity politics?
I think we can move. Hypothetically speaking, anyway, I think we can move forward from it. And one of the reasons that I have hope for that is actually a story that I believe it was Michael Austin who wrote it. I'd have to go back and look to be sure. But it was about polling that was done of parents of school-age children and school board members. Mm-hmm. Was that Michael?
That was Michael.
Okay.
Yeah. Who I trained.
I recall training him personally myself, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But that polling indicated that parents and school board members, which I thought was very interesting. The school board members piece in particular, both groups favored education and educational goals that are far more in line with the 1776 Commission's report than any of the ridiculous 1619 stuff. The 1619 name comes from the idea that America was really founded in 1619, not 1776, because in 1619 the first slaves were brought to America, and that is really the defining moment in American history, the creation of America, which is utter garbage. Utter garbage. The fact that most parents and school board members haven't bought into that utter garbage, I found very hopeful.
Yeah.
The issue is, and partly because this is partly my bias as a former educator, I believe so much of this begins with education. I think education is so foundational to cultural change. If parents and school board members will become active at the local level and fight this stuff, fight against this sort of revisionist garbage from 1619, promulgate traditional history education of this country so that people really can understand what America is, how it's different, American exceptionalism, all of those kinds of things as a cultural identity, if I can call it that, a national identity. If people will go out and promote the stuff that they say they believe, and if they'll do it at the local level, which is where they can actually make a difference, then I have a lot of hope that that the country can move forward from this asinine American, identity politics stuff, which really began. I agree with you, Brian. The end of the Bush administration and moving into Obama was really kind of where it got its wings. It really has its roots in political correctness, and some literary theories, literary criticism theories that originated in the 60s and 70s about power and those kinds of things. So it's been, sort of bubbling around for a few decades now. But I, based on the information from the polling that Michael wrote about, it's clear to me that it hasn't completely taken hold in the minds of parents and school board members. It may be much more strongly held beliefs in the minds of those students from those educational systems. But I don't think it's too late to turn that around. Joe, what do you think?
Two quick
that?
points on that.
Yeah.
I think one, what you said about school boards just underscores the importance of how local elections and stuff like that is far more important. It affects you, I won't say far more important. It affects you on a individual level far more than a presidential election, a Senate election, even a gubernatorial election. School board elections affect your day-to-day life. City council elections, stuff like that. That is where this change gets made, at the local level, not at the federal
zoning
level.
Boards. I'm always
exactly.
talking about zoning
we should
boards.
abolish most zoning boards. I hope that's not a ridiculous thing to say, but zoning is stupid and hurts businesses.
And people, generally speaking. You're right.
Yeah.
But to the degree that you're going to have an election for a zoning board,
Sure. You vote for the people who want to get rid of the zoning board.
you can have influence over those people.
Right.
Much more than I can write 15 letters a day to Joe Biden. He doesn't care. Doesn't even read them. Zoning board members live where I live. They'll listen to me. They may not agree with me, but they'll listen.
Yeah. And the second thing on that is, I think that you have to make sure the left wants this to be kind of a one side or the other side thing. They don't want this issue with what we're teaching in classrooms and history to have any nuance. They want to say either you teach that America was built on slavery and racism and all these horrible things, or you teach that slavery and racism was no big deal and that America has always been the best nation for everyone. Of course, neither of those things are true.
Right.
The truth is that America has always been built on great ideals that we've never lived up to.
Exactly.
So
Just like
the
every
truth,
individual American life
of course,
is built on
of
great
course. So
ideals.
the
that we
truth
don't live
that
up
they don't want you to think of is that, of course, you're going to teach about racism. You're going to teach about slavery because those things are blots. They're stains on our history, our country.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're going to say, look, this didn't define us. We overcame it, and we are still reaching for the ideals of the country that we haven't gotten there yet, but we're still reaching for them. The same thing that, the people in the Constitution and the Declaration wrote back then, that wasn't about slavery. That wasn't about racism. That was about reaching for something better. And the men who wrote that weren't that good. They
were slaveholders.
They were slaveholders too.
Yeah.
And we're not erasing that. We're just saying, look, they wanted something better, and they weren't good, but eventually, we've
They're
made
about
progress.
as good as I am.
Yeah, and the left doesn't want you to think of that. They want it to be just this one side or the other side. So it's really stupid.
That's such a good point, Joe. And it's nice. We got him fired up a little bit. Did you see that? That was good. But that is such a good point. There are we like, and by we I mean people,
Americans, everyone.
Yeah, we like simple stories,
Black and white.
Yeah, with the good guy and the bad guy, and the good guy is good in everything he does, and the bad guy is just heinous and evil in every way. And there's nobody like that. I mean, there are. A writer that I used to read a lot used to say his example of that was, Hitler liked dogs. And it's, Hitler was about as evil as you get, but there was at least this one little thing, he actually liked dogs. He was nice to them. He, whatever. I'm not defending Hitler. I don't want to get email about this. The point is that nobody is one thing. Everybody has multiple facets to them. Thomas Jefferson was brilliant and owned slaves. George Washington was a brilliant, courageous, gracious by all accounts man who owned slaves. I mean that
Ben Franklin was a genius inventor who was a womanizer.
Yeah, exactly.
Terrible.
So Jefferson a womanizer as well. Martin Luther King was inarguably a great figure in the American landscape and an adulterer. That is.
You can be arguably one of the most significant figures of the past 70 years and also have cheated on your wife and be an adulterer. It's possible to do both things. God uses everyone.
That's exactly right, Joe.
I just want to point out that all these flawed great men, not a single one you mentioned was Asian. So clearly Asians are flawless.
I'm not sure that logically follows, but it's worth noting, I guess. Now I'm going to have to go Google Bruce Lee flaws and come back and let you know.
He has none. Don't worry.
He must add something.
Chang from Community.
Jackie Chan sang Chinese opera. That's a flaw all by itself.
Singing opera's hard, dude.
Yeah, I know, but Chinese opera is terrible. Anyway. As fascinating as Chinese opera is, I'm sure, to WJ Live viewers, what else we got, Joe? What else do we want to remember as part of Trump's legacy?
Well, we're running out of time, so I have two things. I'm going to try to get to them quickly and see what you guys think about it. I think that one thing that we should not forget that Trump did is he changed the conversation on a lot of areas where conservatives used to sort of be lockstep in, and I think in the wrong way on. And one of those ways is on criminal justice reform. I think that one of the big flaws of the conservative movement pre-Trump, and to an extent still, is that they don't focus enough on sentencing reform, and they don't focus on people, nonviolent offenders who are just kind of sitting and rotting in jail and
You're talking
stuff like
sort
that.
of neocon, that.
Yeah, conservatives have been historically tough on crime.
Sure.
And Trump basically said, look, you can punish crime and be as tough as you want on criminals, dangerous, violent criminals and rioters. But he also said, look, we can be a party of compassion. We can work with the other side to get things done. Back in December 2018, Trump signed into law the First Step Act, which was this monumental criminal justice reform legislation that really no one else had been able to do, right? Obama was not able to do it. And according to one report, it has reduced prison terms for more than 7,000 people. And here's the thing. There's 150,000 people, I think, in the federal prison system. This was, like it said, a first step.
Right.
But Trump recognized the need for a first step, and he was able to get this coalition of Democrats who hated him and Republicans and actually get something meaningful done. And I think that's very, very admirable and just great. I think that looking forward now, conservatives have something in their they've latched on to criminal justice reform. Not to name drop, but Van Jones, who's the CNN guy, the old Obama administration guy, he has said before, conservatives deserve credit on this. Conservatives have taken the lead on criminal justice reform. They've made this into an issue, and he's absolutely right. And I hope that can continue after Trump.
Yeah, Trump's action there was actually to not repeal, but in a sense, repeal
a broken system.
A broken system put in place largely by Bill Clinton, or signed into law. Much of it signed into law under the Clinton administration, and championed by Joe Biden.
Yeah, back when the consensus between both Republicans and Democrats was you got to throw drug offenders into jail for as long as possible. And I'm not going to say this was just a Biden thing or just a Clinton thing, because it was a Reagan thing and it was a Bush thing as well.
Absolutely.
Every Republican and every Democrat back in the 80s and 90s said we got to be as tough on drugs as we possibly can.
Right.
And Trump basically accomplished the first step in reversing that.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Joe, because that really is, I think, something that will never really get. I know you said Van Jones mentioned it, but I mean, it's never going to get that wall-to-wall media coverage that it kind of does deserve, because. And
it's a first step.
It is. There's a lot to go. And, because criminal justice reform is one of those very uncomfortable conversations that we need to have as a country.
And it's a tough line to walk.
Yeah, very tough.
You do. I mean, I think all three of us at this table would agree we want to be tough on crime, but there's a difference between being tough on crime and being tough on people.
And being cruel on crime.
And knowing where that line is drawn.
And realizing
tough.
What is prison. Is prison for punishment? Is prison for rehab? Or is prison where we throw people because we don't know what else to do with them?
Yeah. Is it for retaliation?
Yeah.
And good, smart people of good conscience would argue all three of those positions.
Sure.
So it's tough. It's tough. And you're right. Trump he deserves a lot of credit for being the first one to really tackle that.
Yes, he does.
And get something done. Lots of people have talked about it, but he actually got something done in a very, it's probably the most bipartisan act of his administration.
It absolutely was. And then sort of along the same overarching point of that is changing the conversation. Trump changed the conversation for conservatives, at least in terms of foreign policy. For decades, the GOP consensus foreign policy has been we're hawks. We are ready to strike. We're ready for war, national defense, whatever. And Trump was strong on national defense.
Absolutely.
But,
he built the military in a lot of ways.
But he said, look, we cannot be in these endless wars. Obama, when he ran for office in 2008, said, we are going to get out of Iraq, I think. Don't quote me on that. I was very young.
Yes,
but I'm almost certain that he said that.
You're still very young.
We're still in there, but according to the Department of Defense, there are 2,500 troops in there. That's not very many troops. There are 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, another decades-long war. That's not very many. Trump has not gotten out. He's not gotten us out of those wars. That's still to come. But he changed the conversation in terms of how the GOP looked at it, and he made progress. Remember in December of 2018 when Trump said, we're going to pull everyone out of Syria, and you could tell it was the right thing to do because every single establishment media person, establishment politician, establishment foreign policy hawk said, this is the wrong decision. This is going to endanger American lives, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Guess what? Congress never voted to authorize war in Syria. Obama went there because he wanted to.
Right.
And this is what Trump has done, this kind of, mavericking sort of style that he took to the presidency. He was able to do good things in terms of foreign policy.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. The last thing I'll say is an old colleague of mine at Reason used to say we have to stop listening to the spy masters and the generals. And Trump has kind of ingrained it into a lot of our minds. Hey, the spy masters and the generals, and the spy masters, I mean, James Clapper, John Brennan, all those people, and the generals aren't always right. They have ulterior motives, and they're not always looking out for your best interests.
Like John Bolton.
Yes. Well, he was never a general. He's just a,
they also do what everybody does. And this should be, what as conservatives, we need to remember this. It is human nature, if you're put in charge of something, it is human nature to want to grow that thing and make it more important.
Right.
Right? So that you're more important. So that you have more authority, you get raises, whatever. You guys have probably heard me say this before. One conservative principle that I'll harp on sometimes is if you put somebody in charge in the federal government of poverty, they will make sure there's as much poverty as possible. They'll never say that. They may not even ever think it, but they will. And I don't mean they're going to go out and make more people poor, but they will expand the definition of poverty, so there are more people that they're in charge of helping, or they will redefine poverty so it's not just about money; it's also about access to education or access to wireless or access to technology or STEM training or whatever. If you put somebody in charge of poverty,
which are good things,
those are all good things.
Yeah,
they're all good things that the federal government has almost no ability to address.
Right.
And when you put somebody in charge of it, you're actually motivating them to increase the levels of poverty, not decrease them. That's why those things are better served by the private sector, by nonprofits, by charitable organizations, because those people actually want to eliminate poverty. They have actual motivation to do that.
And then you throw in their their want to get bigger. Throw it in with a company, let's say a private company like a defense contractor.
Right.
That
wants
they
also to
feed
get
off
bigger.
of each other, so that the defense contractor helps the government get more power, and the government throws billions of dollars in the defense contractor's way, and that is called the military-industrial complex.
And the general retires in 30 years, and where does he go work?
Exactly.
The defense contractor.
To lobby for the defense contractor.
I know we're running real time on time, but I do want to say I wish Trump had tweeted this out, but I saw Pence tweet it out. I want to say a few days
Trump
ago.
can't tweet.
Oh,
That's
right.
true.
Yeah, I totally forgot. Yeah, so maybe that's why Pence did. But Pence tweeted out something along the line. I wish I knew it exactly off the top of my head, but he basically said the Trump administration is the first one in a very long time that did not enter any new wars.
That's right.
Yes.
And that is amazing when you really
Yes.
think about it, especially given how the media paints Trump as, they were fretting that, he might set off the nuclear bomb or, he has the nuclear codes in his last few weeks. And that's what one of the things they're worried about. I think that's Pelosi even cited that for impeachment. And it's like, no, the dude literally did not enter any new wars. And
Right.
that's commendable.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
And one quick note I wanted to mention about Barack Obama and Iraq, which is Barack Obama did promise to get out of Iraq, and he did it. He pulled everybody out of Iraq. And he did it so poorly that was a huge impetus to the rise of the Islamic State group.
Did the war in Iraq ever end? No. I think
American
it's been going
involvement
on.
in it ended briefly.
Okay, because I know people still say, it's been an 18-year
We probably
war.
still had consultants there.
Okay.
But I don't think we had a military presence. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Barack Obama pulled out all American military.
Okay.
And it was not sustainable.
Right.
Then we had to go to war against the Islamic State, essentially. And so he put people back in to do that.
Which is a mixture of Obama and Bush's fault.
Yes. So all that to say is, Donald Trump went in and fixed that.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump really does get the credit for the end of the Islamic State as a useful force, an organized force. Anyway, so yes, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us for the 50th episode of WJ Live. We will be back here tomorrow with the 51st episode of WJ Live. It's funny how that works. It's 50 today, and then tomorrow it's going to be the 51st.
So on Thursday, we'll have as many episodes as you are years old.
That's correct.
All
That'll be
right.
the 52nd episode.
works.
Tomorrow's Inauguration Day, and so tomorrow we're going to do kind of the opposite of what we did today. Today we looked back at Donald Trump's accomplishments and what he should be proud of. We're going to look forward tomorrow on WJ Live at what a future Biden administration may look like and what we are not looking forward to, the things that we think he's going to try to put in place quickly in the first days and weeks and months of his administration that we're not expecting to be happy about. So join us then. That is sure to be an informative episode, our 51st. You can be also a supporter of WJ Live, and we need you to be. We are now up to 3,000 over 3,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/WJ Live. However, we're generally watched by more than 3,000 viewers. So we need you to become one of those subscribers. We need all of our viewers to become subscribers. That really helps us out. So we just had the graphic on there. Jump on there on youtube.com/WJ Live. There it is, back again. Click the subscribe button. Click the bell.
Oh, ding.
And become a subscriber, and you'll always be notified when a new episode comes up, whether it's the 51st episode, the 53rd episode, the 119th, whatever it is. You'll get a notification so you don't miss it, because I know you don't want to. Thank you for joining us today. We will be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, live, or you can catch us at any time on YouTube or Apple Podcasts. Wherever you find your podcast, we'll be there. But please subscribe. It really helps us out. It's a way to support WJ Live and the Western Journal in bringing you the best commentary, the best journalism, the best truth that we know how to bring you. We're going to keep doing that if you keep supporting us. So please come support us. And we'll see you next time on WJ Live.
Hey guys, huge story. We need a fresh card. Let's red label it. Roll as fast as we can.
All right, on it. Sounds good. All right, guys, we got a red label breaking story. Can we get a picture for that? And can we try to get that out in the next 20 minutes? I want eyes on it as soon as possible.
On it, Joe. 2 more minutes and we'll be live.
Sam, we're going to need a slot for that story, so figure out what you want to bump. Ashley, we're going to want to translate it into Spanish yesterday.
Sí, señor. We can slide it in at 2:30. It should be going out here in about 10 minutes.